Olivia Mitchell wiped down the counter for the third time that evening. Each circular motion deliberate and thorough, demonstrating the attention to detail that had become her signature. At 27, with 5 years of waitressing experience behind her worn-out sneakers, she remained the youngest staff member at Harvest Table Diner on the outskirts of Millfield. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The evening shift had left a familiar ache in her feet. Manager Rick Dawson had announced upcoming staff cuts, with cold eyes deliberately avoiding Olivia's section of the diner. 2 senior waitresses would remain, 3 part-timers, and 1 full-timer requiring immediate confirmation of continued employment in a struggling business. The word "cuts" hung in the air like grease from the kitchen vents, and Olivia knew exactly what it meant. Kendra, the head waitress, leaned closer to her after the announcement. "He fought hard to keep you on the schedule," she whispered, her voice concerned but practical. "Word is he thinks you're not assertive enough with the difficult customers." Kendra kept her voice low, but not so low that others couldn't hear. "Says you give away too many free refills and spend too much time chatting with the regulars." Olivia's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. For nearly 3 years, she had maintained the highest customer satisfaction ratings without missing a single shift. She had never displayed rudeness or poor judgment during busy rushes, regardless of how chaotic the diner became. Her tip record spoke for itself, but apparently that wasn't enough for Rick. "The kitchen staff specifically requested to keep you, though," Kendra continued, wiping down her own section with less precision than Olivia had shown. "That's got to count for something." But Olivia had been in the service industry long enough to understand how these things worked. Requests from kitchen personnel carried weight only when they aligned with what the managers already wanted. When they conflicted, the requests became suggestions that could be easily ignored. The narrow parking lot stretched ahead of the diner like a strip of concrete cutting through the landscape, its perimeter dotted with flickering lampposts. Financial reports had indicated the business was struggling, with decreasing customer numbers and increasing operational costs. Olivia found herself studying every aspect of their operation, every customer interaction, every potential improvement with the intensity that had kept her employed through 3 ownership changes. "Stay attentive, people," came Rick's voice through the staff meeting. "Maintain professional attitudes and follow standard procedures. This should be routine, should be." Olivia had learned to pay attention to phrases like that. In her experience, shifts that should be routine had a tendency to become anything but routine. She adjusted her position at the counter, keeping her notepad ready and her eyes constantly moving across the dining area. The dinner rush had ended precisely at 8 in the evening, maintaining the predictable pattern that had been established over countless weeknights. The post-rush quiet provided relief, but it also revealed financial pressures that daylight busyness might have concealed. Olivia's instincts were screaming at her, though she couldn't identify exactly why. Something about the diner felt wrong, too quiet, too empty, too obviously on the brink of failure. She had learned to trust those instincts over the course of her employment, even when she couldn't articulate the specific reasons for her concern. "Mitchell," Rick's voice cut through her thoughts with obvious irritation. "Stop hovering like you're expecting the health inspector. The business plan is solid." She wanted to respond that business plans were sometimes wrong, that overconfidence had killed more restaurants than bad food, that her job was to focus on customers regardless of what financial forecasts indicated. Instead, she nodded once to acknowledge the instruction and continued her systematic attention to detail throughout her section. Kendra caught her eye and shrugged slightly, understanding passing between them without words. She had seen Olivia's dedication prove valuable too many times to dismiss her concerns, even when their managers seemed determined to ignore them. The diner's atmosphere seemed to thicken around them as the evening progressed deeper into the slow hours. Olivia found herself calculating customer spending patterns, identifying potential loyalty incentives, and mentally rehearsing service improvements that she hoped would never be necessary to implement in desperation. 20 minutes before closing, her worst fears materialized with unexpected consequences. The bell above the door chimed as an elderly man with a weathered face and military cap entered. His gait was unsteady, and Olivia immediately recognized the distinctive posture of someone who had served in combat. The embroidered Vietnam veteran on his faded cap confirmed her assessment. "Just coffee, please," he said quietly, settling into a booth by the window where he could watch the parking lot. "And maybe a menu if the kitchen's still open." "Kitchen closes in 15, Rick called out from behind the counter, his tone suggesting he hoped the newcomer would make a quick exit. "Limited options at this hour." Olivia was moving before Rick finished speaking. "Stay in your assigned section, Mitchell." Rick's voice cut through the quiet diner with unmistakable authority and annoyance. "Closing procedures are your designated responsibility." But Olivia had already committed to her course of action. While other staff members continued their closing duties or scrolled through their phones, waiting for the final minutes to pass, she was approaching the veteran's table with a fresh pot of coffee and a full menu. "The kitchen might be winding down," she said with a warm smile, "but I know the cook would be happy to prepare something special for you. Veterans eat well at Harvest Table, no matter the hour." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The man looked up, surprise evident in his tired eyes. "Don't go to any trouble, miss. Coffee's fine." "It's Olivia," she corrected gently. "And it's no trouble at all. Our cook's brother served in Desert Storm. He has a soft spot for military folks." After a moment's hesitation, the veteran ordered a simple meal meatloaf with mashed potatoes. Olivia relayed the order to Miguel, the night cook, who nodded immediately despite the late hour and the nearly completed cleanup. "You're going to get yourself fired," whispered Denise, another waitress who was counting her tips at the counter. "Rick's been looking for reasons." Olivia continued her preparations without responding, assembling a basket of fresh rolls and portioning butter onto a small plate. When Miguel rang the bell indicating the meal was ready, she arranged everything with the care usually reserved for the diner's expensive specials, rather than a simple meatloaf plate. The veteran ate slowly, methodically, with the deliberate appreciation of someone who had known real hunger. Olivia kept his coffee cup filled and engaged in quiet conversation during the lulls between his bites. She learned his name was Harold Jenkins, that he had served as a combat medic in Vietnam, and that he had lost his wife of 42 years just 3 months earlier. "First time I've eaten in a restaurant since Martha passed," he admitted, his weathered hands wrapped around the coffee mug. "She always did the cooking. Feels strange being out alone." When Harold finished his meal and asked for the check, Olivia hesitated. This was precisely the kind of moment Rick had criticized her for, her tendency to follow her heart rather than company policy. She made her decision without further deliberation. "Your money's no good here tonight, Mr. Jenkins," she said quietly. "This one's on me. To thank you for your service and to welcome you back to restaurant dining." Harold's eyes widened then, filled with unexpected moisture. "That's not necessary, young lady. I can pay my way." "I know you can," Olivia replied with gentle firmness. "But sometimes we need to accept kindness as readily as we offer it to others. Martha would want you to." The mention of his late wife's name broke through whatever resistance remained. Harold nodded once, a man accustomed to saying much with little, and Olivia understood he had accepted her gesture. Rick was waiting by the register when she returned, his expression making it clear he had observed the entire interaction. "That's coming out of your tips, Mitchell," he said coldly. We don't give free meals without management approval. I'm aware of the policy, Olivia responded, maintaining professional courtesy despite the tension. I'm covering his bill personally. That's not the point, Rick continued, his voice rising slightly. You can't make these decisions independently. Every free coffee, every courtesy dessert, every exception you make comes with costs that affect our bottom line. Olivia remained silent, understanding that this confrontation was about more than one meal. It represented a fundamental difference in philosophy about service and community that had been building for months. Miguel emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on his apron. Food cost for that meal was under $5, boss, he said casually. Kitchen was already clean. When the order came in, no extra labor involved. Rick turned his glare toward Miguel, who remained unmoved by the manager's obvious displeasure. The cook simply returned to his station, leaving Rick to continue his criticism without backup. Harold approached the counter during this exchange, his posture straightening almost imperceptibly as he sensed the tension. Years of military service had given him an instinct for conflict situations. Is there a problem here? He asked, his quiet voice carrying unexpected authority. No problem, sir, Rick answered immediately, his tone shifting to customer-friendly politeness. Just a minor staff discussion. Hope you enjoyed your meal. Best meatloaf I've had since my wife passed, Harold replied, his eyes moving between Olivia and Rick with careful assessment. Young lady here made a widower feel welcome. That's worth something in my book. He placed a $20 bill on the counter despite Olivia's earlier refusal. For the staff tip pool, he clarified, not for the meal. After Harold left, Rick continued his criticism of Olivia's decision-making, though with slightly less intensity. We're running a business here, not a charity, he concluded. Remember that if you want to keep your job through these cuts. The night ended with unresolved tension, and Olivia drove home with a heaviness that had nothing to do with physical exhaustion. She had always believed that kindness and good business weren't mutually exclusive, but Rick's perspective made her question whether her values aligned with the direction Harvest Table was heading. Her small apartment felt especially empty that night. The single-bedroom unit above Mrs. Grayson's garage had been home for 3 years, its affordability allowing Olivia to pursue her online business classes while working full-time. Tonight, its familiarity offered little comfort as she considered the possibility of unemployment in a town with limited opportunities. Sleep came reluctantly, interrupted by dreams of empty tables and financial calculations that never balanced properly. When her alarm sounded at 5:30 the next morning, Olivia felt as though she hadn't slept at all. The early morning darkness enveloped her as she drove toward the diner for her opening shift. Harvest Table's breakfast service began at 6:30, which meant arriving by 6 o'clock to prepare coffee, heat the grills, and ensure everything was ready for the morning regulars who structured their days around the diner's reliability. The headlights of her aging Honda illuminated something unexpected as she approached the diner's parking lot. Where there should have been empty asphalt, there was instead a line of military vehicles, parked in formation across the entrance. Olivia slowed her car, confusion replacing her morning fatigue. 3 olive green Humvees and what appeared to be an actual tank or at least some kind of tracked armored vehicle effectively blocked access to the diner. Men and women in military uniforms stood in small groups, their breath visible in the cool morning air. She parked on the street and approached cautiously, unsure whether this was some kind of training exercise or if there had been an emergency situation overnight. As she neared, an older man with captain's insignia stepped forward to meet her. "Are you Olivia Mitchell?" he asked, his tone professional but not unfriendly. "Yes," she replied, increasingly confused. "I work the morning shift. Is something wrong?" The captain smiled slightly. "Nothing's wrong, Miss Mitchell. We're here because of Harold Jenkins." "Mr. Jenkins? The Vietnam veteran from last night?" Olivia's confusion deepened. Is he okay? Harold's fine, the captain assured her. In fact, he's better than he's been in months, according to his daughter. After dinner here last night, he called her for the first time since his wife's funeral. Told her about a waitress who reminded him that kindness still exists in the world. Olivia felt her cheeks warm despite the morning chill. I just treated him the way anyone deserves to be treated, she said simply. His daughter is Colonel Sarah Jenkins, the captain continued, commanding officer of our reserve unit. When she heard what happened, both your kindness and how your manager responded, she made a few calls. We decided Harold deserved to see something special this morning. As if on cue, another vehicle pulled into view, a civilian car this time. Harold emerged from the passenger seat, assisted by a woman in a full-dress military uniform adorned with the insignia of a colonel. His face registered surprise and then unmistakable emotion when he saw the assembled military personnel. The soldiers came to attention as Harold approached, offering him a formal salute that caused the elderly veteran to straighten his posture and return the gesture with practiced precision, muscle memory from decades earlier taking over despite his age. What's all this? Harold asked, his voice thick with emotion. Breakfast formation, Colonel Jenkins replied with a smile. These men and women wanted to join you for breakfast and meet the waitress who showed such respect to a Vietnam veteran. Rick's car pulled into view at that moment, his expression changing from annoyance to astonishment as he took in the scene. Before him, he parked haphazardly and approached with the uncertain steps of someone walking into an unexpected situation they couldn't immediately categorize. What's happening here? He demanded, attempting to assert authority despite his obvious confusion. We can't have vehicles blocking the entrance. Our customers won't be able to get in. Actually, Colonel Jenkins responded, her voice carrying the natural authority of someone accustomed to command. You're about to have 63 customers, if you can accommodate us. My unit would like to have breakfast here this morning. Rick's expression transformed instantly from irritation to eager welcome, the potential revenue calculation visibly registering in his eyes. Of course. We'd be honored to serve your unit. I'll need to call in extra staff, but we specifically request Olivia Mitchell as our server. The colonel interrupted, her tone making it clear this was a condition rather than a preference. My father speaks very highly of her service. Your father? Rick asked, confusion returning. Harold Jenkins, she clarified, nodding toward the elderly veteran, who now stood surrounded by respectful soldiers, eager to hear his stories. Vietnam combat medic, Bronze Star recipient, and apparently a recent beneficiary of Miss Mitchell's exceptional customer service. Understanding dawned on Rick's face, followed quickly by the realization that his criticism of Olivia's actions the previous night was now common knowledge among the assembled military personnel. His authority and judgment had been called into question in a very public and unexpected way. We'd be happy to have Miss Mitchell serve your group, he managed, his earlier reprimand conspicuously unmentioned. As the military personnel began filing into the diner, filling every booth and table, Olivia found herself at the center of an operation far more complex than her usual morning shift. Miguel arrived early, having been called by Rick with promises of substantial overtime pay, his expression suggesting he was enjoying the manager's sudden reversal in attitude. Told you the veterans matter, he said quietly to Olivia as they coordinated the massive breakfast order. Some lessons cost more to learn than others. The morning became a blur of coffee pots, pancake stacks, and conversations with service members eager to share their connection to Harold or their appreciation for community members who recognized the value of veterans. Olivia moved through it all with the same attentive efficiency that characterized her regular shifts, though with a growing awareness that something fundamental had changed in her workplace dynamic. Colonel Jenkins approached her during the brief lull in the breakfast service. My father hasn't smiled like this since before my mother passed, she said, her professional demeanor softening. "What you did might seem small to you, but it reconnected him to life when he was fading away from us." "It was just a meal," Olivia replied, uncomfortable with the scale of response her simple gesture had generated. "It was dignity," the Colonel corrected gently. "You saw him as a person with value, not just an inconvenient late customer. In my experience, how we treat people when there's nothing to gain reveals more about our character than grand gestures ever could." As the military group prepared to leave, Harold made his way to Olivia one final time. "Didn't expect all this fuss," he said with a slight grin that took years off his weathered face. "My daughter always did have a flair for the dramatic. Gets that from her mother." "It's been an honor serving you and your daughter's unit," Olivia responded sincerely. "You've got a gift, young lady," Harold continued. "Seeing people when they feel invisible. Don't lose that, no matter what anyone tells you about business or efficiency." The vehicles departed as they had arrived, in orderly formation, leaving the parking lot oddly empty after the morning's unexpected event. Rick had retreated to his office, presumably to calculate the considerable profit from serving 63 hungry military personnel, and had not emerged to resume his criticism of Olivia's customer service philosophy. The regular morning customers began arriving, many of them curious about the military vehicles they had seen departing. Stories spread quickly in small communities, and by lunchtime, the diner was busier than it had been in months, filled with people who had heard about the military takeover and wanted to see the place for themselves. Kendra approached during the unexpected lunch rush, her expression bemused. "Whatever you did, it worked," she observed, nodding toward the full tables. "Rick's been on the phone with the owner all morning. Something about reconsidering the staff reduction plan." The day continued with unusually high customer volume, many of them specifically requesting Olivia's section. By closing time, she had earned more in tips than any previous shift in her employment history, but the financial benefit felt secondary to the connection she had helped create within her community. Rick emerged from his office as she was completing her closing duties. His approach was hesitant, lacking the confident authority he typically projected when addressing staff. "Mitchell," he began, his tone notably different from the previous evening. "The owner would like to speak with you tomorrow morning before your shift." Olivia felt her stomach tighten. Despite the day's success, corporate decisions often followed their own logic, disconnected from daily operations and individual contributions. "Is this about the staff reductions?" she asked directly, preferring clarity to extended uncertainty. Rick's expression suggested internal conflict between his previous criticism and the day's undeniable success. "It's about customer engagement strategies," he replied carefully. "Your approach seems to have generated significant community interest." The carefully worded non-answer told Olivia everything she needed to know about Rick's current position. His authority had been undermined by events beyond his control, and he was recalibrating his approach to align with the new reality rather than acknowledging his earlier error in judgment. That evening, Olivia returned to her apartment with mixed emotions. The day's events had been unexpectedly affirming, but tomorrow's meeting with the owner remained an unknown variable in her employment future. She had always believed that kindness and good business sense could coexist, but experience had taught her that not everyone shared this perspective. Olivia woke before her alarm the next morning, her mind already cycling through potential outcomes of the upcoming meeting with the diner's owner. She had met Gerald Hammond exactly twice during her 3 years at Harvest Table, once during her initial interview and again during a perfunctory visit he had made to assess renovation needs. The previous year, both interactions had been brief and impersonal, leaving her with little insight into how he might view yesterday's events. She dressed with particular care, selecting her most professional-looking outfit within the constraints of the diner's casual uniform requirements. The small adjustments wouldn't be obvious to customers, but they helped her feel more prepared. for whatever awaited her. The parking lot was empty when she arrived, save for an expensive black SUV with tinted windows that she recognized as Hammond's vehicle. Rick's car was conspicuously absent, though he typically arrived early on days when the owner visited. The silence inside the diner felt heavier than usual as she entered through the staff entrance, the normal morning preparations temporarily suspended by the unusual circumstances. Gerald Hammond sat alone at the counter, reviewing documents spread before him with such intense focus that he didn't immediately notice her arrival. At 62, with silver hair and the trim physique of someone who prioritized fitness despite a demanding schedule, he projected an aura of efficient competence rather than warmth. "Mr. Hammond," Olivia greeted him, maintaining professional courtesy despite her apprehension. "Rick mentioned you wanted to speak with me." Hammond looked up, his expression unreadable as he gestured toward the empty stool beside him. "Miss Mitchell, thank you for coming in early. Please have a seat." She complied, careful to maintain good posture and direct eye contact despite her discomfort. Whatever was coming, she would face it with dignity. "I've spent the evening reviewing some interesting numbers," Hammond began, turning one of the documents toward her. 3 years of customer satisfaction metrics, tip percentages, and employee evaluations. Your file makes for compelling reading. Olivia remained silent, unsure whether his statement required a response or was merely the preamble to whatever decision had already been made. "You've consistently maintained the highest customer satisfaction ratings in this location," Hammond continued, his tone matter-of-fact rather than congratulatory. "Your tip percentage exceeds the company average by 14%. You've never missed a shift, never had a customer complaint, and routinely receive positive mentions in our feedback surveys." He paused, studying her with the calculated assessment of someone who had built a restaurant empire through careful analysis rather than emotion. "Yet Rick Dawson has repeatedly noted concerns about your approach to customer service. Specifically, that you prioritize customer experience over operational efficiency." Hammond's directness was both refreshing and unsettling. Olivia decided that matching his straightforward approach was her best strategy. "I believe exceptional customer service drives financial success," she replied evenly. "Every decision I make is intended to build customer loyalty that generates long-term revenue, even if it sometimes requires short-term flexibility." A flicker of something that might have been approval crossed Hammond's face, though it disappeared so quickly she couldn't be certain. An interesting perspective for someone without formal business training. "I'm halfway through my business degree," Olivia countered, feeling a sudden need to establish her credentials. "Evening classes and online courses for the past 3 years. My thesis focuses on customer loyalty as a sustainable competitive advantage in service industries." This information visibly recalibrated Hammond's assessment. He leaned back slightly, his attention fully engaged in a way it hadn't been before. "And you've been applying those theories here, in my diner?" "Yes, without authorization." "Yes." The simple honesty of her response seemed to surprise him more than any elaborate justification might have. Hammond studied her for a long moment before continuing. "Tell me about Harold Jenkins." The unexpected pivot momentarily threw her off balance, but Olivia quickly recovered. Vietnam veteran, recently widowed, first time dining out alone since his wife's death. Ordered meatloaf and mashed potatoes 20 minutes before closing. "And you chose to comp his meal without managerial approval." "I chose to cover his meal personally," Olivia corrected. "The diner lost no revenue. I paid for his dinner out of my own tips." Hammond nodded slowly, processing this distinction. "Why?" The question hung between them, deceptively simple, yet probing deeper than the mere facts of the interaction. Olivia considered and discarded several responses before settling on the unvarnished truth. "Because some moments matter more than money," she said quietly. Mr. Jenkins wasn't just hungry for food. He was hungry for connection, for acknowledgement of his service, for proof that life could still have moments of warmth after losing his partner of 42 years. She paused, then continued with growing conviction. I didn't see it as giving away a free meal. I saw it as investing in a human relationship that reflects the values this diner should represent in our community. Hammond's expression remained neutral, but something in his posture shifted slightly. And the military vehicles blocking my parking lot yesterday? Was that also part of your customer engagement strategy? Despite the tension of the moment, Olivia felt an unexpected smile touch her lips. That was an unanticipated consequence. Mr. Jenkins apparently called his daughter after dinner. She happens to command the local reserve unit. Yes, Colonel Sarah Jenkins, Hammond nodded. She called me personally yesterday afternoon. This revelation caught Olivia completely off guard. She called you? Indeed. A remarkably direct woman. She explained the situation from her perspective and inquired about my business philosophy regarding community engagement and veteran recognition. Hammond gathered his documents into a neat stack, his movements precise and deliberate. She also mentioned that several local veterans organizations have expressed interest in establishing regular meeting schedules at Harvest Table, contingent upon certain staff members remaining in their positions. The implication was clear, but Olivia waited for him to continue rather than jumping to conclusions that might still prove premature. I built this company from a single diner much like this one, Hammond said, his tone shifting to something more personal than she had previously heard from him. Started waiting tables at 17, saved enough to buy the failing restaurant by 24. Everyone told me it would never succeed because the location was wrong, the concept was outdated, the economy was struggling. He tapped the stack of documents with one finger. They were wrong because they were calculating the wrong variables. They saw food cost and labor percentages. They didn't see community connection and relationship value. Hammond turned to face her directly. Rick Dawson is an excellent administrator. He maintains tight cost controls, enforces corporate policies, and runs a clean operation. What he doesn't do, what he has never understood despite my repeated attempts to explain, is build the kind of community loyalty that sustains a restaurant through economic downturns and changing market conditions. Olivia felt the conversation shifting beneath her feet like sand being redistributed by waves. What had seemed like a disciplinary meeting was transforming into something entirely different. The business plan Rick presented to address declining revenue focused exclusively on cost-cutting measures, Hammond continued. Reduced staffing, smaller portions, limited menu options, shortened operating hours. Textbook MBA approach to a struggling business. He slid a different document toward her, this one displaying customer traffic patterns and revenue figures for the past week, with yesterday's numbers highlighted in bold. Your approach generated a 34% increase in customer traffic and a 27% increase in revenue in a single day. That was an unusual situation, Olivia felt compelled to point out. We can't expect military vehicles to bring in customers every day. Hammond smiled for the first time since she had entered. No, but we can build on the community connection that has clearly begun to form. The local paper called me this morning requesting an interview about Harvest Table's support for veterans. The regional morning show wants to feature our diner in a segment next week. 3 corporate offices in the business park have inquired about establishing regular lunch delivery services. He stood up, gathering his documents with a finality that suggested decisions had been made. Rick submitted his 2-week notice this morning. Apparently, he's accepted a position with a fast food chain that aligns better with his management philosophy. The news struck Olivia like an unexpected gust of wind. He quit? He recognized that his approach and mine have diverged significantly, Hammond replied diplomatically. Which brings me to the purpose of our meeting. Olivia braced herself. Still uncertain where this conversation was ultimately heading despite the increasingly positive signals. Harvest Table needs a new manager, Hammond stated simply. Someone who understands that restaurants are about more than food and efficiency. They're about creating spaces where communities form and strengthen. I'd like to offer you the position, contingent upon your commitment to complete your business degree. The offer was so far from what she had expected that Olivia momentarily lost her carefully maintained composure. Me? But I've never held a management position. You've been managing customer relationships and team dynamics informally for years, according to these reports, Hammond countered, indicating the documents. The technical aspects can be taught. The instinct for building community loyalty is much harder to develop. Her mind raced through implications, challenges, and possibilities. What about my class schedule? Some of my courses are during business hours. We'll work around it, Hammond replied with the confidence of someone accustomed to solving logistical problems. I'd rather have a manager with formal education and the right instincts than someone with experience, but the wrong approach. The bell above the door chimed as Miguel arrived for his shift, his curious gaze taking in the unusual scene of Olivia and Hammond in private conversation. Hammond acknowledged him with a nod before turning back to Olivia. Take the day to consider the offer, he said, handing her a folder containing what appeared to be a formal employment contract. We can discuss details tomorrow morning. In the meantime, I believe you have a diner to open and a community to serve. As Hammond departed, Miguel approached with undisguised curiosity. Everything okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. He offered me Rick's job, Olivia replied, still processing the unexpected turn of events. Rick quit this morning. Miguel's eyebrows shot up, then he broke into a wide grin. About time Hammond figured out who's really been keeping this place going. What did you tell him? That I need to think about it. Miguel laughed as he tied his apron. You've been thinking about how to improve this place since your first shift. The only difference now is you'll have the authority to implement your ideas. He paused, then added more seriously, the kitchen staff will back you 100%. We've seen how you treat people, customers and colleagues. The morning rush began as regular customers arrived, many of them greeting Olivia by name and asking about the previous day's excitement. She moved through her familiar routines with mechanical efficiency, her mind occupied with weighing the opportunity against her concerns about taking on such responsibility while still completing her degree. Around mid-morning, the bell chimed again, and Harold Jenkins entered, this time accompanied by a woman in her 70s whom Olivia didn't recognize. Harold spotted her immediately and made his way to the counter, his companion following with an appraising gaze. Heard there might be some changes happening around here, Harold said by way of greeting. Thought I'd come see for myself. Olivia smiled, genuinely pleased to see him return so soon. Good news travels fast. Small towns, Harold shrugged. Wanted you to meet someone. This is Eleanor Whitman, president of the Golden Veterans Association. We have about 60 members who meet monthly, always looking for a good place with better people. Eleanor extended her hand, her grip surprisingly strong for her age. Harold hasn't stopped talking about this place since yesterday. Says you understand what respect looks like in action, not just words. I just try to treat people the way they deserve, Olivia replied, uncomfortable with praise for what she considered basic decency. That's rarer than you might think, Eleanor observed shrewdly. Our group used to meet at Bellamy's on 3rd Street until they changed ownership. New manager couldn't be bothered with a bunch of old-timers taking up space and nursing coffee. Refills, as he put it. Harold nodded solemnly. 60 potential customers, minimum monthly attendance, plus family members who often join us. Not to mention catering for our annual recognition dinner. All looking for a new home. The business implications were obvious, but Olivia sensed this conversation was about more than potential revenue. These were people seeking community and respect in a world that increasingly overlooked their contributions and experiences. "I'd be honored if your group considered Harvest Table," she said sincerely. "Though I should mention that my position here might be changing soon. I've been offered the manager role." Eleanor's eyes brightened with approval. "All the more reason to bring our business here. Leadership matters, especially when it's earned through actions rather than just assigned by title." As they settled into a booth for breakfast, Olivia noticed Kendra watching the interaction with interest. When she returned to the counter, Kendra leaned close to speak privately. "Word is Hammond offered you Rick's job," she said without preamble. "You taking it?" "I'm still thinking it through," Olivia replied cautiously. "It's a big step." Kendra nodded toward Harold and Eleanor, now engaged in animated conversation over coffee. "Those kinds of connections don't happen by accident. You've been building community here for years while Rick was focused on cutting costs. This place needs what you bring more than another spreadsheet expert." The morning progressed with unusual energy as news of the management changes spread throughout the staff. Rather than the uncertainty that typically accompanies leadership transitions, there was a palpable sense of optimism and possibility that Olivia hadn't felt in the diner for months. During a brief lull, she retreated to the break room to review the employment contract Hammond had provided. The terms were more generous than she had anticipated, with provisions for flexible scheduling around her class requirements and a clear path for advancement once she completed her degree. Miguel appeared in the doorway, hesitating before speaking. "Got a minute? There's something you should see." She followed him to the front windows, where he discreetly indicated a car parked across the street. Rick sat inside, watching the diner with an expression that even at a distance conveyed bitter resentment. "He's been there about 20 minutes," Miguel said quietly, "just watching." Olivia felt a sudden chill despite the kitchen's heat. Rick's departure had been presented as his choice, but his behavior suggested a different narrative. Has he spoken to anyone? No, just sitting there. Hammond's offer must have really thrown him if he's this worked up about it. The implications settled uncomfortably. If Rick felt undermined or replaced, rather than having made his own decision to leave, his resentment could manifest in ways that might damage the diner's reputation or operations during his remaining time. As if sensing their observation, Rick started his car and drove away, his departure as abrupt as his appearance had been unsettling. "That's not good," Miguel observed unnecessarily. "Guy with a grudge and 2 weeks to act on it." "Let's not borrow trouble," Olivia replied, though she shared his concern. "For now, we focus on serving our customers and maintaining the positive momentum." The afternoon brought unexpected visitors as 3 members of Colonel Jenkins' unit arrived in uniform, explaining they were on their lunch break from the nearby reserve center. Their presence drew attention from other customers, creating natural conversations about military service and community support. Olivia seated them in a central location where their uniforms would be visible to anyone entering, recognizing the marketing value without needing to orchestrate it explicitly. The soldiers ordered substantial meals and left generous tips, but their impact extended beyond the immediate transaction as other customers engaged them in conversation and sometimes covered their checks anonymously. By late afternoon, Olivia had made her decision. The opportunity Hammond offered aligned perfectly with both her professional aspirations and her personal values. The risks, Rick's apparent resentment, her limited management experience, the challenge of balancing new responsibilities with her ongoing education were real but manageable. She was preparing to call Hammond when the diner's atmosphere suddenly shifted. The front door opened with unnecessary force, and Rick entered, his body language projecting controlled anger beneath a thin veneer of professional composure. He surveyed the dining area with critical assessment before approaching the counter where Olivia stood. "I see Hammond wasted no time implementing changes," he observed coldly. nodding toward the promotional veterans discount sign she had placed near the register that morning, something he had repeatedly rejected as unnecessary expense. "Just testing some community engagement strategies," Olivia replied neutrally, conscious of customers within earshot. "Did you forget something from your office?" Rick's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Actually, I came to have a conversation with my replacement. Professional courtesy, you might say." The potential for public confrontation raised immediate concerns about customer experience and staff morale. "Let's continue this in the back," Olivia suggested, already moving toward the office to draw him away from the dining area. Once inside with the door closed, Rick's carefully maintained facade crumbled, revealing the raw anger beneath. "3 years I've managed this place by the book," he began, his voice tight with suppressed emotion. 3 years of hitting corporate targets, maintaining labor costs, and running a profitable operation. Then you undermine me with one publicity stunt, and suddenly I'm the problem?" Olivia maintained her composure, recognizing that his anger stemmed from wounded pride rather than rational assessment. "I never intended to undermine you, Rick. I made a judgment call about one customer that happened to have unexpected consequences. Consequences that Hammond is using to justify replacing me with a waitress who has zero management experience," Rick countered bitterly. "Do you have any idea how that looks on my resume? How it will affect my career trajectory?" The accusation stung, but Olivia refused to be baited into an emotional response that would only escalate the situation. Hammond made his decision based on different management philosophies, not personal considerations. Your approach prioritizes operational efficiency. His vision apparently emphasizes community engagement. "His vision," Rick repeated with evident disdain. "His vision was perfectly aligned with my methods until yesterday's military publicity stunt made him reconsider. Let's not pretend this is about philosophy. It's about optics and Hammond seeing a marketing opportunity." There was enough truth in Rick's assessment to make Olivia uncomfortable, though she believed Hammond's decision reflected genuine business strategy rather than mere opportunism. Before she could formulate a response, the office door opened without warning. Harold Jenkins stood in the doorway, his weathered face set in an expression of calm authority that seemed to fill the small space. "Everything all right in here?" Kendra mentioned there might be a situation developing. Rick's expression cycled rapidly through surprise, irritation, and forced politeness. "Just a private conversation between management personnel, sir. Nothing to concern yourself with." Harold's gaze shifted between them with the assessment of someone who had witnessed countless confrontations during his military service. Didn't sound private from outside this door. Sounded like someone with wounded pride making threats against a colleague who outperformed him. The direct characterization left Rick momentarily speechless, his prepared argument suddenly inadequate against Harold's blunt assessment. "Mr. Jenkins," Olivia began, "this is a personnel matter that affects the entire community this diner serves," Harold finished firmly. "When leadership transitions happen, they ripple outward. How they're handled tells us everything about the character of the people involved." He turned his full attention to Rick, his voice dropping slightly but gaining intensity. "Son, I served with men who couldn't accept when someone else had a better approach. Their pride cost lives. This is just a restaurant job, not combat, but the principle remains. How you leave matters as much as what you accomplished while you were here." Rick stared at Harold, the unexpected intervention momentarily disrupting his prepared grievances. The veteran's calm assessment had cut through his professional veneer to the wounded pride beneath, leaving him visibly struggling to regain his composure. "With all due respect, sir," Rick finally managed, "you don't understand the restaurant business or the position this puts me in professionally." Harold didn't flinch from the dismissal. "I understand leadership. Spent 30 years watching good and bad examples of it. Good leaders build their people up and create something larger than themselves. Poor leaders tear down what they can't control and leave destruction in their wake. The simplicity of this distinction hung in the air between them, its truth resonating beyond the immediate circumstances. Olivia watched as something shifted in Rick's expression, not surrender, but perhaps the first acknowledgement that his approach might be damaging his own interests as much as anyone else's. "I have 2 weeks' notice to fulfill," Rick said stiffly, retreating to procedural correctness as a defense. "I intend to complete my professional obligations regardless of personal feelings." "Glad to hear it," Harold nodded. "The true measure of professionalism is how we handle situations we didn't choose and outcomes we didn't want." As Rick departed, still bristling but noticeably subdued, Harold turned to Olivia with a slight smile. "Military teaches you to recognize when reinforcements are needed." Kendra mentioned there might be some tension back here. "Thank you," Olivia said sincerely. "Though I'm sorry you were pulled into a workplace disagreement." Harold waved away her concern. "Communities support each other. That's what you showed me yesterday when everyone else saw an inconvenient late customer. Seems only right to return the favor." When Harold returned to his table, Olivia took a moment to collect herself before emerging from the office. The confrontation with Rick had crystallized her decision about Hammond's offer. The diner needed leadership that prioritized community, connection over rigid adherence to standardized procedures, not because efficiency didn't matter, but because sustainable success required both. She called Hammond that evening and accepted the position, negotiating specific accommodations for her class schedule and establishing clear expectations for the transition period. Hammond seemed genuinely pleased with her decision, confirming her start date as manager would coincide with Rick's final day. "I'll announce the change to the staff tomorrow," he concluded. "Though I suspect most of them have already guessed." "What's happening?" News traveled quickly through Millfield's business community. By the following morning, several local shop owners had stopped by specifically to congratulate Olivia on her promotion, many of them sharing stories of their own interactions with Rick that suggested his approach to management had created friction beyond the diner's walls. "Never understood why a place with such good food made it so difficult to arrange catering for our staff meetings," remarked Janet from the credit union. "Tried 3 times to set up a regular order, but Rick insisted on a minimum head count that just didn't work for our smaller branch. Hope you'll reconsider that policy." Similar comments from other business owners revealed a pattern of rigid policies that had gradually isolated Harvest Table from potential revenue streams and community partnerships. Rick had been running the diner efficiently according to standardized metrics, but at the cost of growth opportunities that required more flexible approaches. The veterans community particularly embraced the change in leadership. Eleanor Whitman returned with 4 other members of the Golden Veterans Association to formally request use of the diner's back section for their monthly meetings, offering to schedule during traditionally slower periods to maximize mutual benefit. "We've been meeting at members' homes since Bellamy's pushed us out," Eleanor explained. "But some of our folks have mobility issues that make private homes challenging. Having a regular spot with accessibility and good coffee would make a real difference." Olivia immediately recognized the opportunity this presented, not just for guaranteed monthly revenue, but for establishing the diner as a community hub that supported meaningful connections among local residents. She approved the arrangement on the spot, offering a group discount that balanced business needs with community goodwill. The most unexpected development, however, came from Colonel Jenkins. She arrived in civilian clothes during a mid-afternoon lull, carrying a leather portfolio and the focused expression of someone with a specific objective. "Ms. Mitchell," she greeted Olivia formally. "Do you have a moment to discuss a potential partnership?" They settled in a corner booth, where the colonel opened her portfolio to reveal detailed paperwork. "The reserve unit manages several community Support initiatives for military families and veterans, she explained. One persistent challenge is finding suitable venues for various programs, family dinners before deployments, reintegration events when service members return, informal. Support gatherings for military spouses during extended training periods. She slid a proposal across the table. We'd like to establish Harvest Table as our preferred venue partner for these activities. It would involve scheduled events throughout the year, with guaranteed minimum attendance and pre-arranged menus. Olivia scanned the document immediately, recognizing the significant business opportunity it represented. The proposed partnership would provide predictable revenue during traditionally slower periods and establish the diner as an integral part of the local military community. This is very generous, she acknowledged, genuinely impressed by the comprehensive nature of the proposal. Colonel Jenkins smiled slightly. It's mutually beneficial. We need reliable partners who understand military culture and respect our service members. You've demonstrated that understanding in ways that corporate venues rarely manage. May I ask what prompted this proposal specifically? Olivia inquired. There must be other establishments with more experience handling large events. The Colonel's expression softened momentarily. My father called me the night after his meal here. It was the first time since my mother's funeral that he sounded like himself, engaged, present, connected to something beyond his grief. When I asked what had changed, he talked about how you treated him with dignity rather than annoyance, despite the late hour and inconvenience. She tapped the proposal with one finger. The military operates on rational analysis and strategic planning, but we also recognize that relationships matter. How you treated one elderly veteran when there was nothing to gain tells me everything about how you'll treat our entire community when there's a contract at stake. The wisdom of this assessment struck Olivia deeply, the recognition that small actions in unguarded moments reveal more about character and values than carefully managed presentations when something valuable is on the line. It was a principle that applied far beyond business context to every human interaction. I'd be honored to establish this partnership, Olivia replied sincerely. Though I should note that I'm still transitioning into the management role, so implementation might require some flexibility during the initial phase. Transitions are something military families understand intimately, the Colonel nodded. We can start with smaller events and scale up as your systems adapt. As Colonel Jenkins departed, Olivia realized that the diner's transformation had already begun, not through dramatic renovations or complete rebranding, but through intentional relationship building with key community segments that created natural momentum and organic growth potential. Rick observed these developments with increasing resentment during his remaining time. He had retreated into rigid procedural correctness, completing required tasks with technical competence but obvious emotional detachment. His interactions with staff became strictly functional, and he avoided customer contact whenever possible. He's just going through the motions, Kendra observed during a quiet moment. Doing exactly what's required, nothing more. That's his choice, Olivia replied, determined not to be drawn into further conflict during the transition. We focus on moving forward, not on reactions we can't control. Despite her diplomatic approach, tensions reached a breaking point during a staff meeting 3 days before Rick's departure. Hammond had requested the entire team gather to discuss the transition plan and introduce several new initiatives Olivia had proposed for improving community engagement. Rick sat silently through Hammond's enthusiastic presentation of extended operating hours on weekends, modified catering policies for smaller groups, and special discount programs for seniors and veterans. His expression remained carefully neutral until Hammond unveiled the final proposal, a monthly community heroes dinner featuring local first responders, educators, and other public servants. This is precisely the kind of initiative that transforms a restaurant from a place to eat into a community institution, Hammond declared, his satisfaction evident. Olivia's concept here perfectly captures the direction Harvest Table needs to move toward. Rick's carefully maintained professional facade finally cracked. "So we're abandoning proven business practices for feel-good publicity stunts," he said sharply. "Wonderful strategy if profit margins don't matter anymore." The room fell silent as Hammond turned toward Rick with raised eyebrows. "Do you have specific concerns about the financial projections for these programs?" "Concerns?" "Yes, I have concerns," Rick continued, months of suppressed frustration suddenly breaking through. "These community initiatives completely disregard operational realities. Extended hours mean increased labor costs. Discounts directly impact per customer revenue. Special events require additional preparation time and dedicated staff." He gestured toward the proposal documents with evident disdain. "This entire approach prioritizes public relations over actual business fundamentals. It might generate some positive local press, but it undermines the systematic efficiency this location has operated with for years." Hammond listened without interruption, his expression thoughtful rather than defensive. When Rick finally ran out of steam, Hammond nodded slowly. "Those are valid operational considerations," he acknowledged, surprising everyone with his measured response. "Every business initiative involves trade-offs that must be carefully managed. The question isn't whether these programs have costs of course they do, but whether those investments generate returns that justify them." He turned to address the entire staff. "Restaurants operate on more than food costs and labor percentages. They function within community ecosystems where reputation, loyalty, and relationships drive sustainable success. The metrics for measuring those factors are more complex than standard P and L statements, but no less critical to long-term viability." Hammond's gaze returned to Rick. "You've excelled at managing the variables that can be easily quantified on spreadsheets. That's valuable expertise. What these new initiatives address are the equally important variables that don't fit neatly into standardized reporting templates: community goodwill, customer lifetime value, word-of-mouth marketing impact." The reframing of Rick's criticism as complementary rather than contradictory expertise diffused the tension without dismissing his concerns. Hammond had acknowledged the legitimate operational challenges, while simultaneously defending the strategic vision they served. "Perhaps," Rick conceded reluctantly, "though I maintain that these programs should be implemented more gradually to assess their actual impact on our bottom line." "A fair point," Hammond agreed. "Responsible innovation requires both vision and careful evaluation. I'm confident Olivia will monitor these initiatives closely and make adjustments as needed based on performance data." The meeting concluded with restored professionalism, though Rick's fundamental disagreement with the new direction remained evident. As staff dispersed to begin their shifts, Hammond approached Olivia privately. "That's the first genuine management lesson of your new role," he said quietly. "Valid criticism, even when delivered harshly, contains valuable insights. Rick's concerns about operational impacts aren't wrong, they're incomplete. Your challenge will be integrating his attention to operational discipline with your vision for community engagement." This perspective shifted Olivia's view of the conflict that had been building. Rather than seeing Rick's approach as simply wrong, she began recognizing elements of his systematic methodology that would strengthen her more relationship-focused initiatives. "I've been seeing this as an either-or situation," she admitted. "Either his way or a completely different direction." Hammond nodded with approval. The most successful businesses integrate seemingly opposing approaches. Rigorous operational efficiency and genuine community connection aren't mutually exclusive. They're mutually reinforcing when properly balanced. That insight guided Olivia's approach during her final days working alongside Rick. Instead of avoiding him, she began asking specific questions about scheduling systems, inventory management, and cost control procedures he had implemented. Though initially suspicious of her interest, Rick gradually responded to her genuine respect for his technical expertise. The labor distribution model I developed tracks productivity by daypart, he explained during one such conversation, displaying a complex spreadsheet he had created. It helps identify when we're overstaffed relative to customer volume. This is impressive, Olivia acknowledged sincerely. Could it be modified to account for community events that might change traditional traffic patterns? The question engaged Rick's analytical mind rather than triggering his defensive posture. Potentially. You'd need to establish baseline metrics for those events and track variance over time to identify patterns. Their professional interaction never developed into warmth or friendship, but it evolved into something resembling mutual respect for different strengths. By Rick's final day, they had reached an unexpected accommodation that allowed for professional knowledge transfer without requiring either to abandon their fundamental perspectives. As Rick completed his final shift, he approached Olivia with an unexpected gesture, a thumb drive containing operational templates and analysis tools he had developed. "These are my personal worksheets," he said stiffly. "Not official company documents. They might help you maintain operational discipline while you implement your community initiatives." The offering represented a significant shift from his initial bitter opposition. Olivia accepted it with appropriate recognition of what it represented. "Thank you. Your systems will help ensure we balance community engagement with sustainable operations." Rick nodded once, maintaining his professional demeanor. "Good luck. This place is different, but maybe that's what it needs." After Rick's departure, Olivia found herself standing at an unexpected threshold, no longer simply transitioning into management, but inheriting responsibility for transforming the diner's identity and relationships within the community. The weight of this responsibility settled on her shoulders with both excitement and apprehension. Harold arrived as she was contemplating this transition, settling onto his now regular counterstool with the comfortable familiarity of someone who had found a place that welcomed his presence. "Saw your predecessor leaving with his bankers. Box of personal items," he observed. "Looked like a man relieved to be moving on, if you don't mind my saying." "I think we both are," Olivia admitted. "Though not for the reasons either of us expected when this started." Harold nodded thoughtfully. "Transitions rarely follow the paths we imagine for them. Military taught me that. You plan for one scenario and get handed something completely different. The skill isn't in preventing the unexpected, it's in adapting to it with integrity." His simple wisdom resonated with her current circumstances. Olivia had never planned to become the diner's manager through such a public confrontation of different management philosophies. Yet here she stood, responsible for proving that her approach could deliver both community connection and business success. "I keep thinking about balance," she shared, "between operational discipline and community engagement, between maintaining what works and changing what doesn't, between honoring this place's history and creating its future." "That's leadership," Harold replied simply. "Not choosing between extremes, but finding the integration point where seemingly opposing values strengthen each other instead of competing." As if underlining his point, the diner's door opened to admit a group of young service members in uniform, followed almost immediately by several elderly couples from the retirement community across town. The space quickly filled with intergenerational conversation as the younger veterans naturally engaged with the seniors, creating connections that transcended age differences through shared experiences of service. "Look at that." Harold gestured slightly toward the spontaneous community forming among the tables. Military folks connecting with civilians, young people engaging with seniors. Happens naturally when you create the right environment. Olivia watched the interactions with growing satisfaction, recognizing that the diner was already evolving into the community hub she had envisioned, not through elaborate marketing campaigns or complete rebranding, but through intentional cultivation of an atmosphere where genuine connections could form organically. "Your management philosophy in action," Harold observed with evident approval. "Creating space for people to connect changes everything. Most businesses focus exclusively on transactions, selling products, maximizing turns, processing customers efficiently. What you're building here is relationships that generate transactions, rather than transactions that occasionally build relationships." The distinction struck Olivia as profound in its simplicity and potential impact. Relationship-first business models created fundamentally different experiences and outcomes than transaction-first approaches, even when offering identical products or services. "That's exactly it," she agreed, the concept crystallizing her intuitive approach into clear strategic direction. "We're not just selling food. We're creating a community gathering place where food facilitates connection." As the evening progressed, Olivia observed numerous small interactions that validated this vision. A veteran offering advice to a young couple about VA home loans, seniors sharing stories with attentive service members, business owners exchanging cards with potential clients they might never have met in more transactional environments. Hammond arrived near closing time, taking a moment to observe the vibrant atmosphere before approaching Olivia. "First official day as manager tomorrow," he noted. "Any concerns?" Olivia considered the question honestly. "Many," she admitted. "But I'm more confident about the direction than I am worried about the challenges." Hammond nodded with approval. "Perfect balance for effective leadership. Enough confidence in your vision to move forward decisively, enough humility about the challenges to remain adaptable." He surveyed the diner once more before adding, "What I see happening here already justifies my decision. The operational details will require attention and adjustment, but the fundamental concept is proving itself before we've even formally implemented it." As closing time approached, Olivia began the familiar routine of preparing for the next day's opening. The tasks were unchanged from her previous role, but her perspective had transformed completely. Each preparation now connected to a larger vision of what the diner could become for the community it served. Harold remained until closing, watching her work with quiet appreciation. When she finally approached to refill his coffee one last time, he offered an observation that would stay with her long after the evening ended. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "what happened here these past few days reminds me of something my commanding officer told me after a particularly difficult mission. He said true leadership isn't about having authority, it's about having influence. Authority can make people comply, but influence makes them commit. You've been leading this place long before you got the title to match." The simple truth of his assessment resonated deeply. Olivia had indeed been exercising leadership through influence, rather than authority throughout her time at Harvest Table, building relationships, demonstrating values, and creating an environment where others naturally aligned with her vision, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. "That means a great deal coming from you," she replied sincerely. Harold smiled slightly. "Veterans recognize leadership when we see it, regardless of rank or title. What you did by refusing payment for my meal wasn't just kindness to one old soldier. It was a declaration of values that rippled outward in ways none of us could have predicted." As Harold left and Olivia completed the closing procedures alone for the first time as manager, she reflected on the unexpected journey that had brought her to this threshold. A simple act of respect and kindness toward one veteran had catalyzed a transformation that extended far beyond her individual role or the diner itself. The tanks that had blocked the restaurant's entrance that morning had long since departed, but their impact remained not as military hardware, but as symbols of how communities mobilize to support values and individuals they recognize as worth defending. In refusing payment from a lonely veteran, Olivia had unknowingly signaled values that resonated far beyond the immediate transaction. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as she formally stepped into management authority. There would be systems to implement, staff to develop, and business metrics to monitor. But beneath those operational details lay a foundational truth that would guide her approach. Sustainable success comes from creating places where people connect with purpose and meaning beyond mere transactions. She turned off the lights with a sense of both closure and beginning, the end of one chapter and the commencement of another with greater responsibilities, but also expanded possibilities for positive impact. 6 months after her unexpected promotion, Olivia stood at Harvest Table's entrance, surveying the transformed space with quiet satisfaction. The physical changes were subtle: new community bulletin boards featuring local events, slightly rearranged seating to accommodate both intimate conversations and larger gatherings, walls now adorned with photographs of local veterans and first responders. But the atmospheric transformation was profound. Where once there had been efficient but impersonal service, there now existed a vibrant community hub buzzing with genuine connections. Regular customers greeted each other by name across tables. Local business owners conducted informal meetings over coffee, and veterans of different eras found common ground despite decades separating their service. Hammond arrived for his monthly review meeting, pausing at the entrance to observe the dynamic environment before approaching Olivia with evident approval. "You've created something remarkable here," he noted, nodding toward a table where 3 generations of a military family were celebrating a young recruit's enlistment. The numbers reflect it, but the intangibles are even more impressive. They settled in Olivia's office, formerly Rick's space, but now transformed with warmer colors and an open-door policy that symbolized her accessible leadership style. Hammond reviewed the performance data with experienced precision. Revenue up 28% compared to same period last year, he noted, satisfaction evident in his tone. Customer volume increased 34%. Staff turnover reduced to practically zero. Social media engagement metrics show Harvest Table mentioned more frequently than any other local restaurant. He closed the report folder with finality. By every measurable metric, your community-centered approach has proven more successful than traditional efficiency-focused management. Even Rick would have to acknowledge the results. Olivia accepted the praise with characteristic humility. The team deserves the credit. They embraced the vision and made it reality through daily interactions. Leadership creates the conditions for success, Hammond countered. Your approach unlocked potential that was always present, but previously constrained. He leaned forward, slightly, his expression becoming more focused. Which brings me to the purpose of today's meeting beyond our regular review. I'd like to discuss expansion possibilities. This unexpected direction momentarily caught Olivia off guard. Expansion? We've only just stabilized our new approach here. Precisely the right time to consider applying the model elsewhere. Hammond replied, I own 3 other locations in neighboring communities that are performing adequately under traditional management, but could benefit tremendously from your community-centered approach. The proposal was simultaneously flattering and intimidating. Olivia had only recently mastered the operational aspects of managing a single location, while still completing her business degree. Overseeing multiple establishments represented a significant leap in responsibility and complexity. I'm honored by your confidence, she began carefully, but I'm not sure I could effectively implement this approach across multiple locations simultaneously. Hammond nodded, having anticipated this response. Not simultaneously, and not alone. I'm proposing a phased implementation with you serving as district manager, overseeing location-specific managers who would be trained in your methodology. He spread out documents detailing a comprehensive development plan. The first phase would involve identifying and mentoring a successor for this location, someone who shares your values and can maintain what you've built here. Meanwhile, you would begin developing a formal training program to replicate your approach for managers at other locations. The vision was ambitious, but thoughtfully structured to build on Olivia's strengths while addressing her legitimate concerns about scope and scale. It represented not just professional advancement, but the opportunity to extend her impact beyond a single establishment to an entire community network. "This is substantial," she acknowledged, mind already processing implications and possibilities. "I'd need to think through the practical implementation details." "Of course," Hammond agreed. "I wouldn't expect an immediate decision on something of this magnitude. Take 2 weeks to consider the proposal and develop any questions or modifications you believe would strengthen it." After Hammond departed, Olivia found herself grappling with mixed emotions about the expansion opportunity. Professional ambition and practical caution competed for prominence in her assessment, alongside genuine concerns about maintaining the authentic community connections that had defined her approach. Harold arrived for his afternoon coffee precisely as these thoughts were circulating. His timing had become so reliable that staff jokingly referred to him as the human clock, his 2:15 p.m. appearance more accurate than the wall timepiece. "You look like someone with a decision weighing on them," he observed as Olivia automatically prepared his usual order. She smiled at his perceptiveness. "That obvious?" "When you've lived as long as I have, you recognize the expression," Harold replied, something significant but not immediately threatening. "Professional crossroads, if I had to guess." Olivia found herself sharing the expansion proposal, knowing Harold would offer perspective unclouded by professional ambition or corporate expectations. He listened without interruption, his weathered hands wrapped around his coffee mug in characteristic stillness. "Scaling something authentic is always the greatest challenge," he reflected after she finished. "Military faces it constantly. How to maintain unit cohesion and shared values across expanding operations without losing the human connection that makes it function effectively." He considered further before adding, "The trap many fall into is trying to systematize relationships, turning genuine connections into procedural checklists. That approach always fails because authenticity can't be mass-produced." The insight struck directly at Olivia's central concern. "Exactly. What works here is genuine. I'm not sure that can be replicated through training manuals and corporate guidelines." Harold nodded his understanding. "Can't be replicated through procedures alone," he agreed, "but can be cultivated through shared values and consistent example. The question isn't whether your approach can scale, it's whether you're willing to invest in growing people who share your fundamental values rather than just implementing your methods." This reframing illuminated a path forward that Olivia hadn't fully articulated. The distinction between replicating methods and cultivating values represented the difference between superficial expansion and genuine growth. "Relationship-centered business can't be reduced to operational procedures," Harold continued, warming to the subject. "But it can be guided by foundational principles that inform decision-making at every level. Your real contribution wouldn't be a management manual, it would be a values framework that helps others make authentic connections in their own contexts." As Harold spoke, Olivia noticed Miguel watching their interaction with interest from the kitchen doorway. The head cook had been with Harvest Table longer than anyone, having witnessed multiple management changes and their impacts on staff morale and customer experience. "Miguel," she called, gesturing him over, "can I get your perspective on something?" He approached with curious interest, wiping his hands on his apron. "What's up, boss?" "If you were going to explain what makes Harvest Table different now compared to before, what would you say?" she asked. "Not the operational changes, but the fundamental difference in approach." Miguel considered the question with characteristic thoughtfulness. "Before, we served food to customers," he replied simply. "Now we serve community through food." Everything flows from that difference in purpose. The elegant simplicity of his assessment captured exactly what Olivia had been struggling to articulate. The transformation hadn't been primarily about operational changes, but about fundamental purpose, seeing food service as a means rather than an end. That's it exactly, she agreed with growing excitement. We're not just in the restaurant business, we're in the community building business, using food as our medium. Harold nodded with approval. That's a purpose that can scale without losing authenticity, because it's about orientation rather than procedures. Teach people to see their work through that lens, and the specific applications will naturally follow. This perspective crystallized Olivia's thinking about Hammond's proposal. The expansion opportunity wasn't about replicating Harvest Table-specific programs or promotions across multiple locations. It was about cultivating a shared purpose that would manifest differently according to each community's unique character and needs. Over the following days, Olivia developed this concept into a formal response to Hammond's proposal. Rather than creating standardized operational procedures, she outlined a values-based framework centered on community engagement, relationship cultivation, and seeing food service as a catalyst for meaningful connection. Her counter-proposal included a modified implementation timeline that prioritized identifying and developing location-specific managers who demonstrated natural affinity for community-centered service. These individuals would receive mentoring focused on purpose and values rather than prescriptive operational requirements. When she presented this approach to Hammond during their follow-up meeting, his response exceeded her most optimistic expectations. "This is precisely why I want you overseeing this expansion," he said with genuine enthusiasm. Most managers would have created elaborate operational manuals, prescribing exactly how each location should implement specific programs. You've recognized that authentic community engagement can't be reduced to standardized procedures. He studied her proposed framework with growing approval. Values-based leadership rather than procedure-based management. It's more challenging to implement, but infinitely more sustainable once established. With Hammond's endorsement, Olivia began the carefully phased implementation plan. The first critical step involved identifying her potential successor at Harvest Table, someone who could maintain the community connections she had established, while bringing their own authentic approach to relationship building. Kendra emerged as the natural candidate. Though initially reluctant to consider management responsibilities, her genuine connection with customers and intuitive understanding of the diner's community role made her ideally suited for the position. "I'm not a manager type," she protested. When Olivia first broached the subject, "I don't have your business background or strategic thinking." "Management skills can be taught," Olivia countered. "Authentic community connection comes from who you are, not what you've studied. You already embody the values that make this place work. The operational aspects are just details I can help you master." Over several months, Olivia gradually shifted operational responsibilities to Kendra while maintaining overall accountability. The transition progressed organically, with regular customers often unaware that leadership was changing hands as the consistent community atmosphere remained uninterrupted. Meanwhile, Olivia began spending one day each week visiting Hammond's other locations, observing their operations and community dynamics with attentive curiosity rather than evaluative judgment. Each establishment served distinctly different neighborhoods with unique demographic characteristics and community needs. The mistake would be trying to make them all mirror Harvest Table, she explained during one progress report to Hammond. Each location needs to develop authentic connections with its specific community rather than implementing a standardized model. This insight guided her approach to selecting and developing managers for the expansion initiative. Rather than seeking operational similarities, she focused on identifying individuals who demonstrated natural, relationship-building abilities and genuine interest in their community's unique character. The Veterans Association continued their regular meetings at Harvest Table, with attendance growing steadily as word spread about the welcoming atmosphere. Eleanor Whitman approached Olivia after one particularly successful gathering that had integrated younger veterans from recent conflicts with their older counterparts from Vietnam and Korea. "You've created something remarkable here," Eleanor observed. "Not just a meeting place, but a genuine connecting point between generations that might otherwise never meaningfully interact." "The community created it," Olivia replied honestly. "I just removed the barriers that were preventing these connections from happening naturally." Eleanor smiled at this characteristic deflection of credit. "That's what the best leaders do. They don't force artificial programs or contrived interactions. They create spaces where genuine community can emerge organically." This philosophy became the cornerstone of Olivia's approach to the expansion initiative. Rather than developing prescriptive programs for each location, she focused on cultivating environments where authentic connections could form naturally according to each community's unique character and needs. 1 year after her promotion, Olivia stood at the entrance of the third location to implement the community-centered approach. The physical transformation had been minimal, just as at Harvest Table. The changes focused on creating spaces conducive to connection rather than dramatic redecorating. Yet the atmospheric shift was immediately palpable. Hammond joined her for the informal relaunch, observing customer interactions with evident satisfaction. 3 locations successfully transformed, each with its own distinct community character, yet all sharing the same fundamental approach to relationship building. "The 4th location presents unique challenges," Olivia acknowledged already, thinking ahead to the final establishment in Hammond's current portfolio. More transient customer base, predominantly focused on quick service rather than extended visits, which makes it the perfect test case for whether this approach can work in less naturally community-oriented environments. Hammond noted, "If we can demonstrate success there, the implications for larger-scale implementation become significantly more compelling." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of an unexpected visitor, Rick Dawson, immaculately dressed in corporate attire that suggested professional advancement since his departure from Harvest Table. His expression registered momentary surprise at encountering Olivia and Hammond together at this location. "Mr. Hammond, Miss Mitchell," he greeted them with professional courtesy, though obvious discomfort. "I didn't expect to find you here." "Rick," Hammond responded pleasantly. "What brings you to Riverside Cafe?" "Market research," Rick admitted after slight hesitation. "My current employer is considering expansion into this area, and I'm evaluating potential competitors." The awkwardness of the situation might have derailed less confident leadership, but Olivia saw an opportunity for meaningful reconciliation rather than continued tension. "Would you like a tour? We've implemented some interesting approaches here that might provide valuable perspective, regardless of competitive considerations." Rick's surprise at this offer was evident, but professional curiosity overcame lingering resentment. "That would be appreciated. Thank you." As Olivia guided him through the establishment, highlighting both operational improvements and community engagement initiatives, Rick's assessment gradually shifted from skeptical observation to genuine interest. The performance metrics she shared increased revenue, reduced staff turnover, growing customer loyalty, spoke a language he respected regardless of philosophical differences. "The financial results are impressive," he acknowledged as they concluded the tour, particularly the sustained growth trajectory over consecutive quarters. "The numbers matter," Olivia agreed, recognizing his professional focus. "They're how we measure whether our approach is working. But they're outcomes rather than objectives, results of building something meaningful rather than targets pursued." Directly, Rick considered this distinction with unexpected receptiveness. "My current role emphasizes operational consistency across multiple locations. Standardized procedures, centralized decision-making, uniform customer experience regardless of location. An approach with legitimate advantages for certain business models," Olivia acknowledged diplomatically, "particularly for concepts where efficiency and predictability are primary value propositions, but limited in contexts where community, Connection becomes the primary value differentiator. Rick completed the thought, demonstrating greater insight than she had anticipated. I've been following Harvest Table's transformation from a distance. The results are thought-provoking. This unexpected openness created space for the professional reconciliation that had seemed impossible during their conflict-laden transition. Rick's acknowledgement of the legitimate success of an approach he had previously dismissed represented significant personal growth beyond rigid ideological positions. Different business models serve different purposes, Olivia offered. The challenge is aligning your operational approach with your core value proposition, rather than forcing standardized methods onto contexts where they don't serve the primary purpose. As Rick departed, Hammond rejoined Olivia with evident approval. That was impressively handled. Many leaders would have treated a former adversary as a competitive threat rather than a professional colleague. Community-centered business isn't just about how we treat customers, Olivia replied. It extends to how we engage with the broader professional ecosystem, including potential competitors. Genuine abundance mindset rather than scarcity thinking. Hammond nodded thoughtfully. Which brings us to the next phase of our expansion conversation. I've been approached about acquisition opportunities beyond our current 4 locations. Potential to extend this model regionally rather than just locally. The scale of this vision momentarily overwhelmed Olivia, yet she recognized it as the natural progression of the journey that had begun with one simple act of kindness toward a lonely veteran. What had started as individual compassion had evolved into organizational philosophy and was now poised to influence an entire regional business ecosystem. That would require developing additional leadership layers, she noted, mind already processing implementation challenges. Values alignment becomes exponentially more complex with each expansion of scope. Precisely why this approach needs your guidance to scale effectively, Hammond agreed. Without someone maintaining unwavering focus on the fundamental purpose, expansion inevitably drives towards standardization and procedural rigidity. Their conversation was interrupted by Harold's arrival, no longer just at his regular afternoon time, but now accompanied by 3 younger veterans he had taken under his wing in an informal mentorship program that had emerged organically from Harvest Table's community atmosphere. Ms. Mitchell, he greeted her with characteristic understated warmth. Expanding the empire, I see. Attempting to expand the approach while maintaining its authenticity, she corrected gently. A more challenging proposition than simply replicating procedures. Harold nodded with immediate understanding. Scaling values rather than just methods, the eternal leadership challenge. He introduced his companions, recently returned service members, navigating civilian reintegration with varying degrees of success. Found these young folks at the VA center looking for connection beyond clinical support. Thought they might benefit from our little community here. The simple intervention represented exactly what Olivia had hoped to cultivate, not just a restaurant that served veterans, but a community ecosystem where veterans naturally supported each other across generational lines without formal programs or institutional structures. Always room at our table, she assured them sincerely. As Harold settled his small group at their preferred corner location, Olivia reflected on the journey that had brought her to this threshold of expanded influence. The progression from waitress to manager to district leader had unfolded through consistent application of values rather than calculated career advancement strategies. Hammond seemed to follow her thoughts with characteristic perceptiveness. Your career trajectory demonstrates the principle you've been implementing. Authentic purpose naturally creates expanding opportunities for impact. Never imagined refusing payment from one veteran would lead to regional expansion discussions, Olivia acknowledged with a slight smile. The scale of impact always begins with individual actions that demonstrate genuine values, Hammond replied. Corporate mission statements and strategic plans have their place, But transformative change invariably starts with simple human interactions that reveal underlying character. As they concluded their discussion and Hammond departed, Olivia completed her final assessment of the location's implementation progress. The operational metrics showed promising early results, but the genuine measure of success was evident in the organic interactions unfolding throughout the space community. Connections forming naturally because the environment had been intentionally designed to facilitate them. 5 years after that pivotal evening when Harold Jenkins had first entered Harvest Table, Olivia stood addressing the managers of what had become Gathering Table Restaurant Group, 12 locations across 3 states, each maintaining distinctive local character while sharing fundamental values of community connection and relationship cultivation. Our success isn't measured primarily by revenue growth or location count, she reminded the leadership team assembled for quarterly review. Those metrics matter, but they're outcomes rather than objectives. Our true measure is community impact, meaningful connections that form because our establishments exist as catalysts for genuine relationship. The assembled managers represented diverse backgrounds and communities, yet shared commitment to the foundational purpose that unified their approach across varying contexts. Several had been promoted from service positions, their natural community orientation recognized and developed through mentorship rather than formal management training. Hammond, now transitioning towards semi-retirement, observed the gathering with evident satisfaction. The expansion he had envisioned had materialized not through aggressive acquisition or standardized replication, but through values-based growth that prioritized authentic community engagement over rapid scaling. After the formal meeting concluded, Olivia found herself in conversation with Eliza Martinez, manager of their newest location and former server who had demonstrated natural gift for community building. "Sometimes I still can't believe this all started because you refused payment from one veteran," Eliza remarked. "Such a small moment with such enormous consequences." "The moment itself wasn't the catalyst," Olivia corrected gently. "It was what that moment revealed about underlying values and priorities. Any of us might make exceptions for customers in special circumstances. What matters is whether those exceptions reflect consistent purpose or mere situational accommodation." Harold, now a treasured elder statesman across the restaurant group, joined their conversation with the timing that continued to define his presence. At 78, he moved more slowly but maintained the quiet authority and wisdom that had influenced their organizational culture from its inception. "Small actions and unguarded moments reveal true character," he observed, settling into the chair they automatically arranged for him. "Planned initiatives and strategic programs have their place, but authentic values emerge most clearly when we think no one is watching or measuring our response." Olivia nodded her agreement, recognizing the simple truth that had guided their entire organizational development. "We've succeeded not by creating elaborate community programs, but by building environments where genuine connection happens naturally because it reflects who we fundamentally are, not just what we strategically do." As their conversation continued, Olivia observed the vibrant community atmosphere that now characterized all their locations, diverse groups finding common ground, intergenerational connections forming organically, and authentic relationships developing beyond mere transactional interactions. The journey from that first refused payment to regional impact had unfolded through consistent application of values rather than rigid adherence to standardized procedures. Each location maintained distinctive local character while sharing the fundamental purpose that unified their approach, seeing food service as a means for building community rather than merely an end in itself. What had begun as one small act of kindness toward a lonely veteran had evolved into an organizational philosophy that transformed not just individual establishments, but entire community ecosystems. The tanks that had once blocked Harvest Tables entrance had long since departed, but their symbolic impact remained a vivid reminder that communities mobilized to support values and individuals they recognize as authentically aligned with what matters most. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and become a part of our Everyday Life Stories community. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We love hearing from our amazing viewers around the world. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload. From us